Thank you for joining today to talk about virtual sales events. Glad that RevGenius and MindTickle have partnered up to bring this webinar to you. So before we get started, let me just introduce myself quickly here. My name is Nick Salas. I'm the head of sales readiness at MindTickle. I've been here a little over, well, I'm just coming up on my year mark actually. So about a year here at MindTickle. Previous to that, I did sales enablement at a company called Workfront, who was recently acquired by Adobe. So I had a lot of great experiences learning about enablement, sales enablement over there. Previous to that, I was selling document and email management software to law firms where I carried a bag and also did a little bit of marketing as well. And prior to that, I was in the electrical distribution world. So I was doing inside sales with some electrical distribution companies, selling to contractors and doing all kinds of fun stuff. So again, I'm really grateful for this opportunity. Happy to be joined by everybody who's come to talk and learn more about virtual sales events. And you know, there's so many different things that we can think about and talk about when, you know, in the context of holding successful meetings virtually. And so I'm glad to be able to share just a few of my thoughts today with everybody. And you know, in the spirit of supporting remote teams into 2021, which it looks like we'll be doing that at least for the first little bit of the year. You know, it's important that us in enablement that we continue to make our virtual meetings more engaging, more impactful, more relevant to our sales teams. It's become even more important now. And while every company is a little bit different in terms of their enablement needs, there are some guiding principles around virtual events that should be considered in most circumstances. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'll plan to sprinkle in specific things that I've used here personally at MindTickle in hopes that it may be helpful to you as well. But in my mind, there are 5 structural areas of building virtual SKOs. And that's what I've listed here on the agenda today. The theme, the agenda, the preparation, the execution, and reinforcement. So let's take a look at the theme first. So the most important part of SKO, in my opinion, is the theme. And this is often overlooked or not considered in depth as much as it should be, because, you know, we get into this mode of thinking like, you know, what do sales reps need to know? Who do we need to get in front of them? What are some important things that we need to push down? But choosing a theme, it requires a more thoughtful approach in analyzing a few important things related to what the company overall is trying to accomplish in the upcoming year. So the first bullet I mentioned here is to ask yourself a question when thinking about the theme around initiatives. What are the strategic business goals and initiatives your company is looking towards in the upcoming year? So let me provide a quick example. My company, MindTickle, we're working on an overhaul of our messaging and how we approach our target market with a strong, compelling, and relevant message. So to accomplish that, I need to ensure that our product team is aligned and building product that aligns with the new message. Additionally, it's important that sales, of course, is bought into the message and approach. Also, our partners need to be bought in, and our pre-sales teams need to be in agreement based on their hundreds of interactions with prospects. And all of this requires a collaborative mindset. And for that reason, our theme at MindTickle for our upcoming SKO is MindTickle One, with the thought that we can only unite as one around product, message, market demand, etc., if we work together and goals are aligned. So that's just one example, but the point is that the theme should be exciting, should be impactful, should guide, and it of course has to guide the content throughout the conference. So secondly here, alignment is key. So as you prepare, think about how you can bring together cross-functional teams and departments to align with your theme. So as you start building out an agenda, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, it's important that the topics and the speakers understand what the relevance of the theme means in context of the content that they will be delivering. So in my example, if I was going to approach product about delivering a presentation on roadmap, I would expect that they would include points that align directly with the way it will be marketed based on our messaging overall that we're doing. So that's what I mean by content alignment. Sometimes our role in enablement becomes coaching these cross-functional teams in this regard, being the compliance officer in a sense that the content matches the theme, which in turn aligns with the business objectives. So third here, it's important to bring in people who the sales team respects and have supported them in the past. So credibility is huge in sales and should be considered when thinking about speakers. Whether these speakers are internal or external, the field, they need to be bought in that the people or group of people that's going to be presenting, that they actually understand their challenges, the sales challenges that they encounter daily, and that their message is ultimately going to add value to their day-to-day efforts of selling more software. Lastly here, I think of sales enablement, us in sales enablement as kind of a marketing department in a sense, right? So our customers are the reps and the managers, and we have to generate excitement about our quote unquote product. So in this sense, I like to create excitement and awareness. So it's just like prospects coming to our site before engaging with a rep. So the sales reps want to know for the upcoming SKO what to expect, what the time commits are, what the theme is going to be, are there specifics around preparation that they can do ahead of time, etc. And for this reason, cross-functional collaboration becomes important as well, in the sense that everyone should be talking about the SKO in advance. And everyone should be looking forward to adding tools and resources to their sales process that's going to help them improve for the upcoming year. So as you think about that, think about logos, hype videos, introductions from leaders, validation from your leadership team, those types of things to be able to market your virtual conference. So as an example of that, I mentioned earlier that we had come up with the theme of MindTickle 1, of this idea of unification and adherence around our message and our product and our goals. So I had our design team come up with a logo for us, which is MindTickle 1, and I'm having it printed on t-shirts, and we're going to print it on the agenda and all the collateral that's going to accompany our SKO, so that the theme, as I mentioned before, will stay top of mind, as that's a really key part of incorporating these virtual events, that everybody's kind of on the same page throughout the duration of the conference. So now that you know your theme, it's important to hear from the field. What do they want to learn? How can the business help them achieve their revenue goals? That's ultimately what sales reps care about when it comes to pulling them out of the field and having them participate in these conferences. I think too often overlooked are the most important people that these meetings, these virtual events are actually built for, which is the sales rep. So if there's one thing that sales reps and managers are not short on, it's opinions. So you'll get very valuable feedback and ideas from the field on SKO topics by simply asking. So once you've aggregated those ideas, you can start to plan how those ideas can fit into your overall theme. So for example, when I last polled the field, I received feedback from reps that there were challenges in related to what they called cutting through the noise. So how can we differentiate? What are some things I can learn that will help our message and vision stand apart from the competition? So that naturally fits into our theme of becoming one team, where I can pull in marketing and product. I can show the field the work that's being done to align on a strong market message. So additionally, this provides a good opportunity to bring in competitive discussions, which we know are incredibly helpful. An additional thing that I'm a fan of that I'll talk about a little later too is our teams hearing from customers. Got feedback on that as well from the field. So if and when they're willing, we should ask them what's compelling to them, what message stands out above others. How can we leverage our great customers to incorporate our theme? So things to consider when planning an agenda here. Okay, let's get into some virtual specific logistics that I have found to be important when holding these meetings as it relates to the agenda. So the more excited and organized you are for these meetings, the more that contagious attitude will filter to the participants. So provide legitimate and valuable opportunities for people to contribute and participate. Again, opinions are endless and knowledge sometimes gets stuck in individual teams. So use SKO as a way to extract that knowledge and those opinions. You never know what will have an impact on the field as it relates to best sharing. So use SKO, like I said, to get it out, to provide opportunities for everybody to get it out. So also, if and when using visual presentations, don't expect that participants will remember all the important words from your slides. So, since these are visual experiences and need to be for high engagement, think about incorporating videos, images, guest speakers, anything to limit the amount of reading and slides that we're asking the field to try and remember. Because let's be honest, they're not going to remember the words on the slide. They're going to remember the experience, the content, and the topics. The slides are just going to help guide and keep the organization flowing. So this is an important part of the agenda. How will your sessions and speakers help motivate the sales teams? So motivation literally means stimulating someone's interest or enthusiasm for doing something. How are your speakers and agenda topics going to do that? So ask yourself that question as you think about it. Try to build in as much opportunities for the speakers to motivate, keeping that top of mind. Keep the mundane and the irrelevant talking points out of the SKO. Be the gatekeeper of content. Make sure the sales reps are going to walk away motivated from the agenda and the speakers. So this next point may seem insignificant, but if we are asking reps to complete something or participate in something during breaks, then it's not really a break. Let their minds reset and prepare mentally for the duration, or at least until the next break. They will be much more engaged if you provide for real breaks during the agenda. Overall, make sure there is a logical connection between your objectives in the theme and the agenda topics, whether it be through external or internal speakers, videos, games, leaderboards, participation points, whatever you think your teams will be most receptive to. You in sales enablement know your teams better than most. So whatever they'll be receptive to, see if there's an opportunity to build that in. And lastly, when finalizing your agenda, ask the sales managers and leaders to publicly recognize success. So speaking about motivation, nothing motivates more than hearing peer success stories, and as a field rep, being recognized for that hard work. So this team-like success approach will help create these collaborative bonds that are hard to do virtually. It'll make the virtual event a lot more exciting from the field and not make everybody feel so disconnected, which physically we have to be right now. So finally here, I'll refer to the checklist that we've included in the virtual SKO playbook that will help you set your own personal agenda to ensure you hit your important targets and deadlines in preparing for SKO. Ultimately, it'll really help in terms of organization and making sure that your workflow in terms of prep stays on track. So this checklist can be downloaded from that playbook that I mentioned. So I talked a little bit ago about compliance, and as much as I don't like to use that word in enablement, for SKOs, compliance, it's actually a really important part of making sure that the speakers are prepared and that the content is going to meet the objectives. So in this sense, we become coaches to the presenters. We shouldn't assume that everyone inside and outside the org understands sales. So we need to be that bridge in enablement. So give feedback on how can their sessions build more credibility. How can you make small content to the adjustments, make small adjustments to the content? What's the relevance to the field? And overall, how is it going to add value to the theme? So always help the presenters start their sessions at the end. What is the objective of this presentation, and how will it ultimately help the field sell more revenue? If that piece is missed, especially in a virtual environment, you're going to lose the reps. If it is more informational enablement and not actionable enablement, consider using a forum other than SKO to deliver the content. In other words, will sales reps be able to go back to their territories after your presentation and take meaningful action as a result of that? Or is it just helpful to know? So keep the informational outside of SKO. In my experience, the actionable enablement is way more impactful when delivered through the SKO. And finally, if I haven't mentioned it enough yet, make sure there is a logical connection between the speaker's presentation and the overall theme. Help the speakers align their content. If it is outside of the theme, it will seem misplaced and disconnected. So make sure their content is relevant to the role of seller in the context of the theme. So now that you have the theme and the agenda and the speakers coached, let's talk about the execution of the content. So overall, we want to make this a memorable event. So we should think about how to impact the day-to-day of an AE by giving them a memorable and enjoyable experience. So to help prepare them for their experience, consider putting together some pre-work that will help the participants get a sense of what to expect and how to prepare. Also, share the theme and outcomes so that they show up excited to learn. So let's talk about some key considerations in making the execution of the event go smoothly. First, think about some of the best conferences you've ever been to. For me, they're the ones where I just showed up ready to learn. I didn't stress about when to be in certain places, where to click to access a meeting, or other logistical distractions. So when considering a memorable experience, think about complementing your efforts with technology that will support your specific organizational needs. The right technology really can be the difference between a stressful conference and a memorable one. So make it easy for your reps to use. Next, stick to the agenda as much as possible while allowing for side conversations to occur within certain parameters. So this becomes an important element of these virtual events. So for example, what I mean by that is if a session ends early or people start gathering from breaks, encourage conversation and idea sharing. So ask a field manager, for example, to share a recent experience that ties into your sales methodology for a couple minutes, or get a rep to share a best practice on a deal they just closed. Whatever it is, make sure time commits are adhered to while also being flexible for informalities and idea sharing. That way it'll still be structured, but it won't feel like it's like a virtual meeting that that everybody's just on because they have to be on it. So finally here, it can be fun to build in competitive opportunities to test knowledge. So get people to participate by calling on them to share their thoughts in a 60-second recap of some important information, for example. This will keep the audience engaged and on their toes and can be done in a way that feels fun and not punitive. And how important is executive and management level buy-in in sales enablement? We know how crucial it is for enablement in general. It's no different during SKOs. So one tip I recommend is to brief the leaders on the content beforehand, even getting them involved in the content dry runs. That way they will be well positioned to insert reinforcement statements, which will help the field add even more relevance to the presenter's content. So just as in your sales methodology, everyone should be speaking the same language and managing to the same processes. So getting the sales managers committed to participating in the SKO for reinforcement and relevance, like I mentioned earlier, is really important. And this, like I mentioned, I'll just put in another plug here. The sales kickoff playbook, it'll take you through additional considerations in terms of making the execution and the day of the event more impactful and memorable. So make sure to download that following this session. So we all know that remembering what you hear and learn at SKO is fleeting, right? Sales reps have so much to remember that we in enablement need to become what I call the chief memory officer. We need to become the chief memory and remembering officer to the topics and content presented at the conference. And there are a number of ways to support knowledge reinforcement, and a lot of it is dependent on the type of content that was presented. But I will recommend a few reinforcement concepts based on common topics that are presented at SKO. So first off, let's look at new messaging, as in the case with me. So SKO is a great time to roll out new messaging, value propositions that align with new products and market demands, etc. If you're in that boat, think of how you can assess the field on that message post SKO. Would a role play be the most appropriate, or can you use your conversational intelligence tool to have the managers do their own assessment? Conversational intelligence tools are a sales enablement's best friend. So let's consider how we can use that in post SKO reinforcement. Also, can you involve your content or product marketing teams to help assess this new messaging, help assess the competency of each rep? Are they hitting the mark? Next, let's look at sales methodology. So I've been in numerous SKOs, and I'm sure you have too, where MedPick or other similar methodologies are rolled out. When this is the case, there's a lot of different considerations for reinforcing, but I think the most impactful are scenario-based assessments where the sales rep can apply the methodology to real life sales situations that they encounter. We can put evaluation parameters around it, help them by showing what good looks like and having them put it in their own sales processes. Another good use case for conversational intelligence would be to assess a rep's understanding of the methodology and put programs together that align back to the SKO agenda. So updates to the sales process, again, should be coached to and held accountable to by the frontline managers, who can in turn share their findings with us in enablement. And this is where coaching becomes so crucial, providing opportunities for the managers to help the AEs incorporate changes into their day-to-day by meeting them where they are currently and helping them get better through a strategic and organized approach to coaching. Lastly, customer stories should be shared post SKO in the context of how they can relate back to use cases, common challenges your customers or prospects see, and target state. So, I mean, we all know our customers are a gold mine of information, and what they have to teach us as we think about making changes to approach and messaging can be extremely valuable. So think about how you're going to reinforce that moving forward. And I'm going to talk about that here in a couple slides as well. So now that you have a new title, you're in the C-suite, you're the Chief Memory Officer in enablement. But as the Chief Memory Officer, we have to take an active role in the execution of our virtual SKOs. So instead of torturing yourself by going back and listening to all the recordings, jot down notes during each session where additional reinforcement should be placed. I call these actionable relevancies. So don't waste your time thinking about reinforcing the informational enablement just yet, but make sure that actionable enablement has a plan around it by capturing the objectives and important mentions during speaker presentations. During these virtual SKOs, I mentioned earlier to try and incorporate opportunities to share best practices. But how can we remember these? So we need to make sure that we are capturing those and redistributing, including my next bullet, which is to memorialize the customer feedback. Sure, the recording post SKO will be valuable to some, but let's enable the field to extract the most relevant and compelling points that will help shape the way that they approach their prospects by making that information easy to access post SKO. So think about creating a type of data sheet and bucketing customer comments into categories. That's my plan for this upcoming SKO. You can even take it one step further and ask AEs to share post SKO on experiences leveraging that information with their prospects and how it helped reframe their approach. Listening to those impact stories will validate that SKO session and keep the field excited to continue hearing from customers. So lastly, I can't stress enough how important it is to partner with sales leadership on the reinforcement. If the reinforcement is formalized as it should be in role plays, conversational intelligence analysis, scenario-based questions, etc., the leaders need to be bought in that enablement is in fact focusing on the right areas of reinforcement. Then it becomes more of a coaching exercise for the leaders to assess progression over time and adherence to the SKO principles. So overall, reinforcing principles learned to SKO is a team effort. It's the job of the enablement team, us in enablement, together with marketing and sales leadership to support the field in their efforts to sell more software by creating enjoyable and relevant experiences for them to continue interacting with this content after SKO. That's our role. That's our new role as the Chief Memory Officer. Is how can we help them remember all this stuff long after SKO is done and over with. So when thinking about measuring the reinforcement and understanding how SKO is impacted, we should first ask ourselves a question, which is, what do we want the field to know? Based on the agenda and speakers, what is the information that needs to be translated across? Secondly, what do we want them to take action on? So based on the information transfer, what can the field take back to their territories and start putting into practice? Those items are what we should be thinking about measuring specifically, both from a data lens and from a feedback perspective. I mentioned earlier about the importance of feedback, and I found that in most situations, sellers are more than happy to provide feedback on what went right and what went wrong. And like I said earlier, sometimes the best option is to just ask. Ultimately, the actionable enablement that accompanies the SKO needs to be measured. It needs to be measured over a defined period of time. So let's take my example of this messaging overhaul that we're going to be doing in our SKO. The reinforcement of the messaging will be to assess a sales rep in the context of their sales process when delivering the updated value proposition. Seems simple enough, but I can do that through role play, but I prefer to use conversational intelligence to evaluate, as this is more real life for me than role play might be. I would then take snippets of those calls and insert them into a program that the sales managers can add feedback to, and they can put their own evaluation parameters on, and what competency they're specifically looking for as part of the new messaging. And based on a score or whatever, as defined by what good looks like, we can reinforce that through advanced learning, or we can take a step back and we can think about redoing the basics. So measuring these scores over time will help give me a good baseline on how the SKO session resonated and what needs more enablement around it. So to summarize, I think there are two key areas of measurement. One that is score and based off data through reinforcement programs, and the other is through written feedback and learning how to implement things differently in the future. They're both just as important, just different ways of capturing it. Additionally, there's a conversation around competency building that I don't want to overlook here too, but that conversation around competency building can be incorporated into SKO measurement as well. For example, what competency are we defining that can be mapped to mastering the new value proposition and message? Additionally, how are we going to baseline the progression of that competency? So questions like that can help add context to your competency framework when measuring the impact of your SKO sessions. So now I put together this visual because I want to take everything that I've said up to this point and look at it visually and how I put pen to paper, so to speak. So I want to visualize it as a funnel here where you can see I first align company objectives to a core theme, as I mentioned at the beginning. Then I get feedback from leadership and adjust my approach to the theme based on their feedback. Once I know what the theme will be, I ask for direct feedback from the field. Ask them the simple question, what do you hope to learn or hear in our upcoming SKO? Based on that question, these are some responses I received here. Some reps wanted to hear from customers, hear the product roadmap, learn how we can cut through the noise, how we differentiate, what are we doing to align our message, those types of things. So from this feedback, I was able to incorporate specific elements into the theme that will help the presenters on these topics make good alignment with their sessions. So after the feedback, I create my own content buckets based on some of the more common things that I hear. So in my case, I was able to bucket the feedback into understanding the message, competitive strategy, standardized roadmap, and of course, customer stories. And I use these buckets to build a first draft agenda of the speakers and the topics that I felt would be well aligned. But it's not about what I feel like is going to be best aligned. So that's why it needs field validation. So my next step was to approach sales leadership on my structure and get feedback on making tweaks and adjustments. So some feedback I received from our leadership team was that they want to not only hear customer stories, but they want to hear those stories through the lens of a CRO. Also, they wanted to make sure that there was departmental alignment in terms of coaching the presenters from cross-functional departments on the value that they're going to bring to the conference. Next, they wanted to make sure and incorporate opportunities to share best practices among the team. And lastly, they wanted someone to come in and motivate the team to get excited for the year ahead. So after this process was complete, I made adjustments to the agenda and started coordinating speakers and time slots. So this process, it does take some time. So I recommend starting as early as you can to make sure that you don't miss important details. You want to make sure and incorporate as much feedback as you can into the conference while making sure, of course, that the theme stays front and center. So let's talk about some virtual specific elements of running a successful SKO. One question we've all been asking throughout this new normal is, can virtual events be as successful as live events? And my answer to that is success needs to be redefined to match the expectations of both the content and the delivery. Of course they can be successful, but when we stop comparing and realize that they have to be successful, we can start to put together pieces that will make sure that it delivers on the outcomes that we defined at the beginning of our planning stages of the SKO. And we're all used to by now that all the nuances of doing video conference meetings and what we need to consider. But the primary thing in my mind is for virtual SKOs is that there's audience participation. So these events are not the time to exclude people or not provide legitimate opportunities for participation. Since everyone takes a different approach to these events, make sure to consider how you can involve everyone to some degree and make sure the participants feel included and heard. I like to compare it to the guy in the back of the old conference room, sitting on the wall, answering emails and not paying attention to the presentation. Get everyone to participate in some form, get people off the wall and excited to chime in. Secondly, we need to support the presenter. These presentations at SCO are not last minute thrown together messages. They've been properly vetted and thought through, and the presenters deserve maximum support from the audience. Make the presenters feel like their messages are being heard. Consider a Q&A at the end or knowledge checks throughout, or even better, have audience members or even sales managers validate and support the presentation throughout with reinforcing statements. Whatever you decide, remember to keep the presenter in mind and all the work that goes into getting these ready. Lastly, I recommend inserting visual elements that will break up the day. And of course, this is more important here in our new environment, doing virtual events than it would be, if we were together in a room. But let the participants see each other, let them share best practices. But in between, give them something to look at, give them something to interact with, something that will break up the monotony of Zoom, whatever you think your teams will be receptive to, like I mentioned earlier. So to conclude, I want to highlight the key takeaways that if you don't remember anything else, at least keep these in mind. These were some of the key points that I wanted to make. First, the theme is your guiding star. So make sure content, images, speakers, etc., are all aligned to reiterating the theme as often as possible. Second, put your coaching hat on when evaluating speaker content. You're in your role for a reason, and a lot of that stems from your deep understanding of the sales process and what the field needs in the context of the presentations that will be delivered. So make sure the speakers are compliant with not only the theme, but with the needs of sales and the upcoming priorities for that particular year. Third, remember, you are the Chief Memory Officer. You have this new title. Think creatively on how you can help the field remember everything that they will hear from the conference. Put into practice some of the things that have worked for you in the past that will be successful for you. And lastly, by measuring impact and competencies, your SKOs will improve over time and you will start to incorporate small but important changes to how you approach it over time. So, lastly, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for letting me be a part of this. And I don't pretend to know what all the important nuances of doing conferences and SKOs virtually are. So please connect with me on LinkedIn. Share with me some ideas that you've incorporated in the past that have helped you, how you begin to structure and organize your SKO. And let's use this as a time for all of us to share best practices and become better at our craft. Thank you very much.